Ruth, first chapter, verses 9 through 21, and deals with the message we're going to hear later of holding the family together. It talks about Naomi and her two daughters, Orpah and Ruth. And Naomi has just suffered some very challenging parts of her life. The Lord grant that you may find security, each of you in the house of your husband. Then she kissed them, and they wept aloud. They said to her, "No, we will return with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Do I still have sons in my womb that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband, even if I thought there was hope for me, even if I should have a husband tonight and bear sons. Would you then wait until they are grown? Would you then refrain from marrying? No, my daughters. It has been far more bitter for me than for you, because the hand of the Lord has turned against me." Then they wept aloud again. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. So she said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." But Ruth said, "Do not press me to leave you or to turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do thus, and so to me, and more as well, even if death parts me from you." When Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more to her. So the two of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women said, "Is this Naomi?" And she said to them, "Call me no longer Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt bitterly with me. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has dealt harshly with me, and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me?"
Thank you, Kurt, for sharing our scripture with us today. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was the story of the day at the nursery school of 4-year-old Jane. This was the first time she had ever heard the story, so she listened carefully as the teacher told the story of the sweet young girl who was fed a poisonous apple by an old witch. The predictable result: she fell asleep, a deep sleep, and would never wake up unless she received a kiss from the wonderful Prince Charming. Jane couldn't wait to get home and tell the story to her mother. At home, Jane said, "Mom, I just have to tell you this story I heard today. You'll never believe it." She began to describe what had happened to Snow White. When she got to the end, she said, "And then, Mom, Prince Charming kissed her back to life, and guess what happened?" The mother responded, "Well, honey, they lived happily ever after." But the little girl shook her head. "No, they didn't. No, Mom, they didn't live happily ever after. They got married." Many have become cynical about marriage. If the happily ever after isn't served up on a silver platter, then maybe the next relationship will hold the magical spell. In their book on marriage, Nina and George O'Neill contend that traditional marriage is a form of bondage for both husband and wife. They list 6 psychological commitments that leads to this bondage. First, possession or ownership of the mate. Second, denial of the self. Third, maintenance of the couple front. 4, rigid role behavior. 5, absolute fidelity. 6, total exclusivity. And they warn subtly, insidiously, often without even knowing it. The clauses of the marriage contract begin to foreclose upon your freedom and your individuality, making you a slave of your marriage. Fortunately, theirs is not the final word on building lasting relationships. In Ruth, however, we can find 2 of the options that an individual can choose to take when a relationship is strained by the realities of life. Like Orpah, Naomi's other daughter-in-law, some people simply walk away from their relationships to pursue happiness elsewhere. Others, like Naomi, remain in the relationship out of necessity instead of love and commitment. Ruth made the decision when times were tough to hold the family together. So let's take a look at Ruth. To begin with, Ruth was a model of responsible living in an irresponsible age. Sounds like ours, right? Irresponsible age that we live in. When presented with an opportunity to walk away from a family relationship, she desired to stay. No doubt she loved her mother-in-law very much, but to Ruth, more was involved. She regarded this as a covenant relationship, that began with the vows she made with one of Naomi's sons. She demonstrated an incredible depth of commitment in her devotion to Naomi. While this was obviously not a marriage relationship between Naomi and Ruth, nonetheless, it magnifies the proper attitude necessary for any relationship to endure. This high level of commitment was a characteristic of Ruth that would spill over into every relationship she had from then on. It indicates what kind of woman, what kind of person she would be. Some people take their commitment to marriage and family lightly. One man wrote, "I hope my wife will never divorce me because I love her with all my heart. But if one day she tells me I am minimizing her or making her feel inferior or in any way standing in the light that needs to become for her to become the person God meant her to be, I hope she'll be free to throw me out, even if she's 100. There is something more important than our staying married, and it has to do with integrity, personhood, and purpose. Now that is just irresponsible. Staying, and helping your spouse to stop minimizing you or making you feel inferior so that you can become the person God meant you to be is the act of integrity, personhood, and purpose. What we also find in Ruth is a person who pledged her commitment without reservation. While verse 14 reveals her desire to care for Naomi in her old age, verses 16 and 17 reveal her decision to hold the family together. This passage is the most beautiful statement of commitment in printed literature. Its beauty and simplicity remind us of the characteristics of genuine commitment to a relationship. The first characteristic of genuine commitment to a relationship is that relationship comes at a cost. All relationships do. Ruth had to sacrifice a great deal personally to stay in this family relationship with Naomi. She had to give up, first, her future. Do not press me to leave you, she says. Ruth was willing to sacrifice her freedom from the responsibility of caring for Naomi in her old age. When Ruth's husband died, she was probably no more than about 25 years old. For all she knew, she would never remarry or have children. But as a widow, she committed to caring for her aging, widowed mother-in-law. This was a complete break with the past, without any promise for the future. Ruth also gave up her familiarity. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. She was willing to sacrifice her national identity and homeland of Moab. She was leaving Moab, her land, where she was born and raised, for a land with new and strange customs. How would she be received there? She did not know. Third characteristic, Ruth gave up her family of birth. Your people shall be my people. She was willing to sacrifice a close relationship with her birth family, the one that never gets severed, to keep her commitment to her covenant family. And the fourth characteristic that Ruth models for us, in commitment to a relationship, Ruth gave up her faith. Your God shall be my God. She was willing to sacrifice her religious heritage and the worship of the idol chessmen. In a way, we could consider this Ruth's conversion. Yes, Ruth's decision to hold the family together was a costly decision for her to make, to be sure. The second characteristic of genuine commitment to a relationship is that it is long-term. Ruth models that. A college man walked into a photography studio with a framed picture of his girlfriend. He wanted the picture duplicated. This involved removing it from the frame. In doing so, the studio owner noticed the inscription on the back of the photograph. "My dearest Tom, I love you with all my heart. I love you more and more each day. I will love you forever and ever. I'm yours for eternity." It was signed Diane. And it contained a P.S. "If we ever break up, I want this picture back." In contrast, notice Ruth's statement, "Where you die, I will die." Now that sounds like a till death do us part type of commitment first made to her husband. She didn't approach relationships with the attitude that if things get tough or don't work out the way that I want, I can leave. No. She had that. If things don't work out, I'll work harder at it. This certainly implies faithfulness. Further, this type of commitment is the glue that holds relationships together, especially when adversity tests them. The third characteristic of genuine commitment to a relationship that Ruth models for us is that it is treated as sacred. "May the Lord do thus and so to me." Ruth didn't just make this vow to Naomi, she also made it with God. We do this at weddings, don't we? We make our vows to each other, but if God's involved, we make them to God too. By invoking the name of God, Ruth made her pledge of commitment complete. She made a physical, emotional, and spiritual vow. There were no reservations. Here's something else we learn about Ruth. She proved her commitment. Every year, thousands of couples pledged their love and devotion to each other only to break their promise even just years later. Ruth proved her commitment in two ways. First, she proved it with convincing words. We need to communicate with our words. Ruth's vow, her words pulsated with deep passion and meaning. Her words didn't have a hollow ring. And secondly, Ruth proved her commitment through her consistent words. Words and acts, they need to match. Ruth followed through with her vow. She left Moab with Naomi and moved to Bethlehem. Let me conclude with this story from Dr. Richard Seltzer, a surgeon. I stayed by the bed where a young woman lies, her face post-operative, her mouth twisted in palsy, clownish. A tiny twig of the facial nerve, the one to the muscles of her mouth, has been severed. She will be thus from now on. The surgeon has followed with religious fervor the curve of her flesh. I promise you that. Nevertheless, to remove the tumor in her cheek, I had to cut that little nerve. Her young husband is in the room. He stands on the opposite side of the bed, and together they seem to swell in the evening lamplight, isolated from me, private. Who are they? I ask myself. He and this wiry mouth I have made, who gaze at and touch each other so generously and greedily. Who are they? The young woman speaks. Will my mouth always be like this? She asks. Yes, I say, it will. It is because the nerve was cut. She nods and is silent. But the young man smiles. I like it, he says. It's kind of cute. All at once, I know who he is. I understand. And I lower my gaze. One is not bold in an encounter with God. Unmindful, he bends to kiss her crooked mouth. And I am so close. I can see how he twists his own lips to accommodate hers, to show her that their kiss still holds. Friends, life is full of challenges and difficult circumstances. While one cannot control the actions of another, he or she can make the commitment to hold the family together.